Good morning, everyone. I'm Kimberly Chalia with PHCA. Thanks so much for joining us for today's webinar. A few quick updates to share before we get started. This webinar is being recorded and will be made available on the PHCA website for those who registered for the webinar. The webinar has been approved for one continuing education credit for all attendees. For those who provided a NAB number, credits will be uploaded within 2 to 3 weeks. As we begin today, all attendees will be in listen-only mode. Please feel free to submit any questions you may have using the Q&A icon on your screen, and we'll make sure to answer as many of those questions as possible at the end of today's presentation. And I'll turn it over to Ronnie.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Let's see if I can make this work. There we go. All right. First of all, I want to thank Pennsylvania Healthcare for inviting me to do the series that we're going to be taking part in. I believe there are 3 of them. And I'm Ronnie Fogelman. I'm the owner and founder of Ledrock Consulting. I'll tell you a little bit more about me as we move forward. But welcome. Hopefully this will be something that will be of value to you as you battle the world of our healthcare sales. So first of all, who am I to be talking about operations? That's always the very first question. I forgot to apologize. I'm just getting over bronchitis and walking pneumonia, so it left me with a very strange laryngitis. I've got my tea and honey and my bottle of water, so hopefully my voice will last throughout the program. I apologize if it sounds a little raspy. So first of all, my background, for those of you who I don't know who's on the call. So I have been in healthcare for over 30 years. I was with Manor Care for many of those years. And I've been in the role of admissions director, liaison, regional marketing manager. I was the Eastern Division Director of Sales and Marketing. And then when HCR merged with Manor Care, I was asked to go to Toledo. And in that role as VP of Sales and Marketing, that's where I was then able to have the responsibility of 6 directors, 52 to 55 regionals, and 360 some odd centers. And I did that for 10 years. And then I retired, sort of, and started Ledrock. That was 13 years ago. Ledrock is our company focuses primarily on small to mid-size companies that do not have the support of a huge corporate marketing and sales department. So I'm hopefully able to bring some of that experience that I've had to those companies and help them to look at what works for revenue generation. So why do I believe that systemizing your sales function is important? It's critical. We do it extremely well with nursing, with clinical. We also do it very well with financial, with our business office. But sometimes what I see when I go into buildings and communities is the sales department is sort of kind of left out there to develop their own or kind of come up with what they need. And so I very often see things that literally could make me cry because there's such easy fixes. And the fixes are that you just make sure that you focus everything in a very systematic viewpoint. So that salespeople very often, me included, are high I people, high D people. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But that means that we very often kind of want to do things our own way. We're very demonstrative and very creative, and sometimes the facts get left behind. So we need our operations folks to help us to pull all of that together, which they are very good at. Where have I seen it work? Well, I don't get called in, remember, until there's a problem. Nobody calls Ronnie at Ledrock and says, census is great, we'd like you to come in and help us. They call me when things aren't, when they've tried everything else that they can think of to try, and they can't move the occupancy or they can't change the revenue production. That's when they call me. And where I've seen it work, we are in 13, actually 14 states now. And we work with CCRCs and ILs and ALs and skilled and hospice and home care. And where I've seen it work are in the buildings where operations says, we want to see some systems in place that we can manage to. And once that's in place, remember, it takes 3 to 6 months to see the results of what you do, but that's what you can do. I'm assuming I have on the call operations people or heads of marketing and sales departments. This is what you can do. Make sure that you have a continuous approach to having systems in place, which is what we're going to talk about for the next 3 presentations. So I want to talk a little bit about the why. If you look at this map or this graph, I hope that picture of us isn't in the way. Maybe it is. I don't know if Kim can move that or not, but when you see this, you see the immediate drop off that COVID had. And of course, we all agree COVID was a horrific thing. It hit us very hard. But what I wanted you to look at with this graph is go back to 2006, 2007. And if you drew a trend line, you would see that the decline had already started in some of our product lines. So I want us to remember that though COVID was terrible, some of the decline had already been taken place. And so, and very often when I go into buildings, they weren't trending it. They weren't seeing a huge decline. So they weren't really watching it that close. Everything seemed to be ticking along, maybe a little lower than last year, but maybe still just under budget. So we weren't paying attention to it. And what this graph shows you is it kind of was happening even before COVID. Now, when COVID hit, the reason I want to show you this graph is because I also think that we have a tendency to maybe not look clearly at the details of what happened during COVID. So this graph shows you the percentage of change in volume year over year from January through July 2020, from January 2019 to July 2020. The blue bar, when you look at the light blue bar, that is the change in total inpatient discharges from the hospitals. And this is a NIC graph. So we really respect the data that comes out of the NIC data. So the blue bar shows you the percentage of change that happened in hospital discharges. The black bar shows you the percentage and change of discharges that went to SNF. And then the green bar shows you the percentage of change that went to home care. If you look at what happened, when you look at January, you can see we're a little bit above average in all 3 categories. We were cooking along. February, March, and April, you can see the decline. The decline of the number of discharges coming out of the hospital was in April, 33.5% off of the normal volume. If you look at the SNF, you can see that continued. We would expect that. We see that it continued from the hospital to decline and to SNF's decline. It also showed a decline to home care until May. And when you look at May, June, and July, you see that we continued to see a decline in the volume of discharges coming to us from the hospital, while home care continued to move back up to the normal. So what does that tell you? What do we see when we look at this? We see that there was an issue. And sometimes I think we get so wrapped up in how busy we are every day that we miss looking at some of these trends, because we could have grabbed this trend in June and really worked very diligently to move those numbers back from the hospital, the discharges coming to us from the hospital. So just a couple points of another kind of system that I like to look at. When you look at this graph, this is our final graph for those of you who don't who aren't into the details of everything. But when you look at this map indicates that by January 2021, you can see that Texas had the lowest occupancy of all. 50 states by that time were at 55.7%. Florida was at 75.8%. Pennsylvania was in the mid-70s. So the trend continued all the way through to the end of the year. So what does this tell you? Was there a trend happening that we weren't paying attention to? Might we have projected some type of a continuance that would have pushed us a little further into putting into place some systems and some plans that would have helped us to recover a little more quickly? So the reason I say this is I'm going to say things today that you're going to have this reaction to. Oh my gosh, what did she just say? I'm going to say things that you disagree with. I'm going to say things you just don't believe. And I'm going to say things that if you were here talking to me, I would hear you say, we already tried that. It doesn't work here. You don't understand. We're different. I've heard all of those from many people. So my message today is just take away what works. Take away from this presentation whatever you see as valuable for your community. And things that you don't think will work, fine. Don't worry about them. We're going to focus on 4 essential areas. There are 4 pieces to the systematic approach that are absolutely critical to put into place. The first is a solid foundation. We're going to talk about why a solid foundation is so important. We're going to talk about what that looks like. How do you achieve that? Why is that a valuable first step or the first pillar of our systematic program we're putting into place? The second area are the systems themselves. What are they? Why do they work? Which ones work really well? Which ones do you have to work at? Which ones are just simply get the system in place? The third pillar are clear goals. We're going to talk a little bit about what that really means. What is a clear goal? Why is it important? What happens when we don't have clear goals in place? And then the fourth pillar is accountability, the word that every operator I speak with hates. It's not fun, it's challenging, but it's absolutely critical. So these 4 pillars must be in place for you to have a system that achieves occupancy success. Or if it's not occupancy and it's revenue, it's what you have. These are the pillars you have to put into place to make sure you get the quality and quantity of referrals and inquiries that you need to succeed in the revenue growth. So these are the 4 areas. The first one is a solid foundation. It's absolutely critical in many areas of our world today to have a solid foundation. So I believe the success begins with making sure that you have in place something concrete, something that says, absolutely, I'm building everything on top of a solid foundation. When you have a foundation that is weak, it can crack. When the world shifts, it will shift. Everything you build on top of it will shift and sometimes crumble. So it's really important to put this solid foundation in place. This is, if you don't know what this is, if you haven't ever seen this before, this is the Sangria Familia. It is the oldest church that is still being built. Any architect knows that you have to have, for anything to stand like this for the number of years this is, there needed to be a solid foundation in place. It's the stable base that your world is built on. The Sangria was started in 1883. It is still not finished. They expect it to be finished by 2026, but they keep moving that deadline. It is supported by large pillars, which you can't see, but large pillars that are the size of gigantic trees. So you want to make sure that when you're looking at this, you look at what holds it up. This, of course, is the Brooklyn Bridge. Again, another stable base. When it was built, it was the largest suspension bridge that spans from Brooklyn to Manhattan over the East River. And when it was put in place in 1869, it took until 1883 to get it finished. And it is built on 4 suspension cables, 4 pillars that hold it up. So I want us to really think about how important that foundation is. And when we think about the foundation, what does that mean, build a foundation? So I'm going to kind of tell you what I see when I go into communities or companies. The first thing I look at is the culture. So it's important for you as leaders of your communities or your companies to really understand what your culture is. Is it sales driven or operations driven? You can tell a lot by department head meetings. How much discussion at a department head meeting is sales driven and how much of it is operations driven? Now, one of the things I will tell you is I get asked that question a lot. Should we be sales driven? And my answer always is no. We care for the most frail among us, the people who need us the most. We need to be operations driven, but that doesn't mean it needs to be at the exclusion of sales driven. If you sat in a department head meeting at PepsiCo, for instance, the entire discussion would be about sales. They would be talking about their different product lines, how much is being sold, what's being left on the shelves, what locations aren't working, what are the salespeople doing, where are they, what are they focused on? Yes, there would be a discussion about operations, which is, how's the new bottle working? How are the cans working? All of those things. Ours is flipped, but sometimes we flip it and we forget the entire sales-driven piece because it's a really important part of your culture. So the first thing I do when I get called into a community, the first thing I try to do is attend either the morning meeting or the department head meeting or whatever you all call it, stand-up meeting, whatever you call these meetings. I don't introduce myself. I sit in the back of the room and my objective is to just observe. I can tell a lot at morning meeting. I can tell what is the discussion before the executive director gets there among the team members. Are they talking? I've been in meetings where no one talks. I sat there and no one says one word until the operator comes in the room. And I've been at the other meeting where everybody's talking about everything and they're engaged. And when the executive director or the administrator enters the room, they become a part of the team. So I can tell a lot about where is the salesperson seated. Are they seated next to the operations person or are they in the back of the room in a corner? What is the discussion? Is the discussion about what census today and that's it? Or is it a deeper discussion about the sales-driven operations of that community? So that's the first thing. And it's really important for you as the leader to know, what is it? And I'm not telling you which one it should be or how it should be, but your role is to know what it is and to work on making sure that it's an inclusive culture. Are you top-down or grassroots? Do I hear when I'm in your building, oh, that's what corporate says we need to do. Corporate says we have to do this. I was just in a community where that's exactly what I heard. I spent 3 days observing everything, and that's what I heard. We don't do that because corporate does it. We don't do that because corporate tells us what to do. Corporate says we can't do that. That's a top-down driven organization. Or is yours grassroots, where I hear a lot of, let's get the team together. I want to talk to everybody. What does everyone else think about it? Let's talk about that. Not saying one's better than the other, but as a leader, it's really important for you to know what type of culture do you have. Are you independent thinkers or team focused? Independent thinkers make decisions on their own. Team people don't make a decision without the whole team. Where are you? Where does your culture fall? It should be, I would think, a nice, gentle balance of both. When you look at your department heads, what are the profiles you see? So I'm going to talk about this really briefly. We're not going to spend a lot of time on this, a whole different other training. But every profile that I do, every profile that anyone does, whether it's a dating profile or any other profile, starts with these 4 profiles. You are either a director, an influencer, a supporter, or a controller. Now, you are all of those. Everyone has all of those, but you will have primaries. So I had a company not very long ago, beautiful CCRC, two CCRCs in the company that invited me to come in and asked me to look at their management, their middle and senior management, and tell us what is our makeup. It's one of the things I'm able to do. They did a little brief assessment. I pulled it all together. And guess what I saw? When you looked at the graph, 85% of the people that worked in their senior and middle management were supporter controllers, which meant there were only a few people that were directors and influencers. What does that do to your culture? Well, supporter controllers hire people they like, people that are like them. So they're not hiring the directors and the influencers for the most part. Just a point here, salespeople are not supporter controllers. Effective, most, there are always a few, but most sales people are high influencers, which means they're motivating. They love to be with people. They're talkers. They have lots of influence over people and they get things done. They're directors. So what is your makeup? And you can do this by just knowing your people, but do you have a nice balance of the types of profiles that make up your culture? So that's the first piece, is your culture. The second piece is, what is your community? My recommendation is the first thing you should do is a SWOT. And SWOTs are fun to do. You're going to look at your strengths and weaknesses. That's internal. So what are the strengths of my community? What are the weaknesses of my community? And then you look at the opportunities and threats that exist in the marketplace. What are they? So what I used to do, or what I recommend when I go into companies now, is get your department heads together, pick a couple people and say, okay, Mary and John, I want you to go out and for the next 2 weeks, I want you to study the strengths of our company. Don't do it based on, oh, I think we're good at this. Really go out and give some time and some thought to, what are we really good at here? What are our strengths? And then choose 2 other people to go out and look at the weaknesses. What could we do a little bit better? What are our challenges internally? Then take your salespeople and divide them up and have a couple people go look at what are the opportunities out there that maybe we're missing, maybe we didn't know existed. And what are the threats? What's coming around the corner? What do we not know? Or what did we not know that they find out? Everyone comes back to the table. You put this all together, and now you have a really clear picture of what you need to do next as far as getting into your building and your market and really understanding what it is you want to focus your sales and marketing on. So that's kind of a begin at the begin. Now let's talk about this solid foundation when it comes to the people. A solid foundation starts with you, again, as the leader of this organization, to have a concrete understanding of the role that you're hiring for. And I know I hear this all the time, that the administrators, I know what I'm looking for. Well, my question would be, do you really? Do you know what attributes your applicant must possess to be successful in this role? Not successful in your company, in this role, in the director of admissions or the marketing director or the hospital liaison. Do you know that role in your company? Because believe me, every company is different. So your company is going to require different things. Remember, based on the culture and based on your SWOT, you're going to look for a different person than the next community would. But it's really important for you as the leader to understand what you're looking for. Remember the people that hired only people like them, and you get an off balance, a kind of unevenness in your culture. Interview only with that goal in mind. Hire the one person who is most likely to succeed based on what you've said or what you've studied, and you now know is what I'm looking for in this role. Sales positions are different than any other role in your community. Not better, not more important, just different. And this is one of the areas where I get that OMG, what is she saying? I've been in this kind of industry for a very long time. Sales positions are different. You are looking for someone different than your social service director, or even your director of nursing, or even you as an executive. So don't make the gut mistake. Use some type of a profiling tool. There are many of them out there. They all use the same piece that we're going to look at in a minute. But use some type of a tool that says to you, I'm looking for this. This person doesn't have that, but they have this. So how does that work? And can I work with this? Please don't weight experience in healthcare too heavily. It's nice. It's wonderful. I don't have to train you, but I can train you in healthcare. There's some things I can't train you on. So let's look at those. What am I looking for in my sales role? Whatever that role is, doesn't matter what the role is. Here are the things that don't really matter, that sometimes we hire based on, but they're really nice. They're very sweet. You know, they're really easy to work with. My family's like them. They work at the #1 hospital. Kind of the #1 mistake you can make is hiring someone that works at the #1 hospital, because when and if you need to let them go, everyone at that hospital is going to hear from this person. They love meetings. Salespeople, effective salespeople, do not like meetings. They don't want to be in meetings. They want to be out. They want to be hearing, talking, listening, questioning. And very often they're not terribly organized. So these are the things that we think are important. Here are the things that really do matter. Some type of provable past success. When I get letters or interest in a position, and I never, in the letter that they send me or the email they send me, there is nothing that says they were successful. I pass, even if they have lots of experience. If you don't know you were successful at something, that you hit a goal, that you passed a goal, that you achieved something no one else has, and you don't tell me that, then that's not important to you. So I want to see provable past successes. I need people that are resilient. When you are in sales, any type of sales, you're going to get knocked down over and over again. You have to be able to pick yourself up. And so a profiling tool will tell you that. They will tell you if this person is resilient. I'm looking for someone who's competitive with a sense of urgency. I want someone who wants to be #1. They want to win. They want to be the best. They want their building, their community to be the best. I want a sense of urgency. When I see someone with a low sense of urgency on a profiling tool, that says to me, when the call comes in, when the inquiry comes in, and it's 10 minutes before lunch, someone with a low sense of urgency says, I'll call them after lunch, after I have my lunch. Or the family that calls and wants to come in for a tour at 4:30, and the person will respond, oh, gee, I leave at 5, low sense of urgency. I'm looking for the person that says, don't worry about it. Get here when you get here. I'll stay here. Or the person that forgoes lunch and says, yes, let's talk about it. I'd like to talk to you right now. I'm looking for someone who's personally accountable. It's one of the two. There's two things I look at. The first things I look at when I look at a profile, resiliency and personal accountability. I don't want someone to say it's not my fault. This happened because the hospital census is low. I want someone that takes responsibility for what they've accomplished or what they haven't. I'm looking for someone that looks for objective values. Anything I do has to meet the objective, the goal. Remember, we did the SWOT, we did the culture. We now know what our goal is. So I want someone in the sales position who's only working toward those goals and the ability to work in chaos. Our industry is one of the most chaotic industries. It changes every 2 years. It changes in buildings even more frequently than that. So this person has to be able to work in a chaotic situation. So just keep these things in mind, because this is your foundation. The person you choose to work to drive your revenue is your foundation, and everything else builds upon that. So here are the 4 profiles. We'll just look at this really briefly. Just want to watch my time here. I want to look at the 4 profiles. These have been in place since the days of Socrates. They don't change. The names change, so people change it from dominance to director or conscientious to controller. The names may change, but these 4 profiles have been in place since Socrates' days. You are going to be 1 or 2 of them primary. So what are you? Are you outgoing, enthusiastic, high-spirited, and lively? Then you're a high I. You're a high influencer. Or are you kind of patient and kind? And you don't like to cause chaos, and you're humble. You're a high supporter or a high S. So these are the 4 profiles. What's important is that in this is for you to know that salespeople are usually a D or an I. So 65, I think it's 65, maybe 66% of the population are CS. So think about that. Over half the population are CSs, yet salespeople are very often Ds and Is. So this is where the challenge comes in when we hire people that are not Ds, Is, because they aren't like everyone else. I just wanted to quickly show you that and kind of keep that in mind. So let's assume now you have the right person. What systems do we need to put into place that, given the right person, are going to lead them to success? It's systems that work. These are the systems that I have seen put into place that actually work. So I'm going to go over them very briefly. They're not systems you haven't heard of before, but I want to talk a little bit about how you put the system in place and why it works. Onboarding is number 1. So you've hired the right person now. Now what do you do? Well, the first thing that we want to remember to do is stay in contact with this person. Don't let them think about it and have buyer's remorse and remember their current employer that they probably needed to give a 30-day notice to is maybe coming after them. So you want to be talking to them a lot in between, giving them information, talking to them about what you're doing. I've got your computer ready. I'm having your business cards printed. I've talked to the team. They can't wait for you to start. Do you have any questions? Keep in contact with them. And on the day they show up, please be there. Hold on, I just have to take a drink of tea. I have had new people start with a regional director in a building. I actually went to the building that day for a different purpose. I got there at 9 o'clock. The person was there and had been there since 8:30, sitting in the lobby. No one greeted them. No one was there to introduce them to anyone. So it's really important. This is really important. It's their first impression of you. I used to send my new admissions directors when I was a regional a single flower that would be on their desk when they got there. You don't have to do that, but at least be there and make sure everything is ready for them. They are ready to hit the road running. We'll talk about that in a minute. So that's onboarding. Sales training. Sales training is not a one and done. It should not be done once a year or once every 3 years. Think about the great athletes we know, or think about Pavarotti. There's great singers that we know. They all train constantly. Why do we think we can hire a salesperson who says they've had sales training? Remember, you don't know what that is. Is that sales training that they had? Does that fit in your culture? Does that fit in your SWOT? Are they going to be able to sell what you have to sell? So sales training should be ongoing. Sometimes that's called coaching. So you may have a sales training once a quarter, which is what I recommend. Some type of whether it's a Zoom or an in-person sales training, once a quarter, followed up by your regional people doing coaching with your salespeople, ongoing. Culture we talked about. It's so critical that you introduce this new person to your culture. The first 2 weeks in any job is really difficult. You don't know where to go for lunch. You don't know where the restrooms are. You don't know what do people just walk in on people? Do they like appointments? So it's really, really important that you introduce this person into your culture, which for me meant it was at one point where new admissions directors that were hired spent 13 weeks getting ready to become an admissions director, introducing them to the company, the culture, the systems, all of that. Not saying you need to do that, but maybe send this person to work with the same position, someone who's successful. Let them spend a week or two with them before you stick them in the office and expect them to perform. Tools. Please make sure that when that person arrives, the tools are already ready, not 2 weeks later or a month later. You've had 30 days to get this ready. Make sure their computer is there, ready to go. Wi-Fi is up and running. Email addresses are up and running. Business cards are done and ready. Social media accounts are up and running. All the tools that this person needs should be at their disposal day one. And that's your role, making sure that you have operationalized this system, the system of onboarding and getting people ready to go. Your CRM, make sure it's up and running. Make sure this person's already got a sign in, they're ready to go, and that there's some type of training for this person on the CRM. I have people right now who have been working in a CRM for 30 days. They've had no training. They don't know what they're doing. They're in there trying to figure it out on their own. When an easy Zoom training on day one would have been able to get this person up and running, ready to go. Weekly and monthly reports. People hate reports, salespeople especially. I'm a high DI. I hate reports. I don't like graphs and charts, but you know what? They're necessary. Our operations people love reports and graphs and charts. So you need to make sure that you have put a system in place. And as we move on to the next podcast that we'll do, we're going to look at the specifics. But today we're just looking at the why and what. So weekly reports on where they go, where's your sales going? Where have you gone? What's the result been? Let's look at your CRM. What have you put in there? What kind of lead management have you done? Some type of a very easy, quick weekly and monthly report. Make sure those reports go to the operators. They're the ones who are going to want. Please don't tell your operator to go into the CRM and look. It's not going to happen. They don't have the time for that. That's why we have regional and divisional people in place. So make sure the system is in place, that the operations team knows what the sales and marketing team are doing. Marketing teams. Briefly, a marketing team should include anyone in your community or your building that has an impact on marketing. The marketing team is not the admissions person or the marketing person. It's the community's marketing team. For me, the marketing team was everyone. When I was an admissions director many years ago, everybody was on the marketing team. My activities director, my housekeeping and laundry, dietary, therapy, even my maintenance man was on the marketing team. He was one of the best people that could do a backup tour. So don't knock people off because of their title or their role. Everyone has a role when it comes to marketing. So you meet monthly, you meet quarterly, you meet annually, whatever your plan is that works in your community, everyone should be a part of that. Now, it takes a little grooming, takes a little getting people to know what their role is. They're a little nervous. They're giving up an hour of their time when they could be doing other things. So it's really important that the person who heads up the marketing knows how to run a marketing meeting, knows what the goal is of the marketing meeting. We'll talk more about that when we get to putting together your marketing team. What's important for you to know now is it's important to have one. It's important to make sure everyone that can impact your marketing and sales is on the team. The marketing plan, I'll tell you what I like and what I've seen work is an annual marketing plan that is very skeletal. but it's a plan that says, here's the 12 months. We're going to do 2 events a month, or this quarter, we're going to do a rehab. This quarter, we're going to do a memory care. Each quarter is designated out as to what your focus is, and maybe how many events and sales calls you want to do. That's your annual, and your advertising goes on there as well. Then your marketing plan for the quarter takes the annual plan, drills it down into, here's what we're going to do on the quarter. We're going to look at this particular quarter. When we said we were going to work on memory care, let's say, we said we were going to do 2 events. One was professional, one was community. Now we plan those events for the quarter, for the upcoming quarter. That's what you do quarterly. You plan where you're going to go on your sales calls. Not specifically, I'm going to go to 5 physicians, and I'm going to hit realtors this month, or I'm going to go to rabbis and pastors. Whatever it is, that goes into your quarterly plan. Then every month, you have a monthly marketing meeting. And at that marketing meeting, you update how you're doing on your quarterly plan. Where are we? What do we need to do? What are we worried about? The advertising plan is a little different. We'll look at it more in depth, but the advertising plan requires a budget and requires a lot of knowledge about all of your publications. And then you lay that over your marketing plans. And that's when you determine whether or not you want, how much money you want to spend for marketing and what you want to do with it. Those are the systems that work. They're not easy. What I always tell everybody, sales is simple, but not easy. It takes a lot of work to do it. Okay, this was the 3rd pillar. It's called all good performance starts with clear goals. So remember that what you have is, you know your market, you know your building, you got the right person, you put the systems in place. Now it's time to look at the goals. So what is a crystal clear goal? If you haven't read any books by Kenneth Blanchard, you might want to look a few of them up. He's a really good writer. Here are some key tools to success for goal setting. I'm not going to spend a lot of time going into each one, but the metrics are important. What is your budget? Does everyone know your budget? Do you hold people accountable to the budget? What is the environmental analysis? You should know what your competitors are doing. Have you been to has everybody been to the competitors? Have you walked through the buildings, looked at them? It's really critically important to success for you to know what you're selling against. Every good car salesman, for instance, knows the competition. If you're selling Chrysler, you know what Ford has that you can beat. You need to be able to, do you think PepsiCo doesn't know what Coke's doing? Of course they do. So it's really important for us to know everything about your environment. I'll give you an example of what I just saw. I went into a building, and I always ask for the competitive or environmental analysis. And I like to see the last 3 years, which is always fascinating to try to get 3 years of anything. But when I looked at it, all 3 of them were exactly the same. I mean, to the number, every number was the same. So I went back to the admissions person and said, to the marketing person and said, can you tell me why they're all exactly the same? She says, yeah, I just copy them from one year to the next because nothing changes in our market. Not true. Lots of things change in your market. It's really important for you to know that. So put that, that's your metrics. Mystery shops. I love mystery shops. They've gotten much, much better now. We can record them. We can give feedback to the team. What do you don't know what you sound like on a call. You know, do you say all the time? Do you not ask any questions? Do you sound kind and compassionate? That's why we do mystery shops. It gives you a metric to get to improve. Marketing plans are your metric. When you had a marketing plan last quarter, did you meet it? Did you meet the plan that you had for the last quarter? Sorry about that, my dog. Sales plans, again, what was your sales plan? I'm sorry, hold on. The sales plan says you're going to go to a certain number of places. Did you go there? It's your metrics that you hold. Quarterly evaluations, I think evaluations are critically important. Some people do them annually, some people do them quarterly. I like monthly. I like to sit down with people and just say, how's it going? How are we doing? Are you comfortable with, am I helping you enough? Those are the types of things. And then when you look at training, you have the same thing. Did you train on basic sales skills? Do your people have good product knowledge? Are you including them? Are you including operations and everything? Many times I see things going around sales and marketing, but nobody ever includes operations. Really important to include operations in these things. Do you know your revenue versus budget? So does everyone understand that there's a budget for, let's say, Medicare patients, but do you know the revenue that's coming from Medicare patients? These are important pieces of training that all your salespeople should know. Liaison field training. I can't tell you how many times I go in and find people that send liaisons over to the hospital and just say, go to the hospital and get me some patients. The hospital liaison is a critical role and it's very difficult. This is not an easy role. You have to know how to balance what you're doing with what they're doing. They're there to take care of the patients. They don't want you interrupting their time. And yet you're very valuable to them because you help them to discharge people. So what you have to do is make sure that you train people on how to approach people in the hospitals. Where do you spend your time? Are they doing horizontal marketing or vertical marketing? So are they only calling on case managers? Or have they developed their training skills to be able to vertically market up and down to directors, AVPs, VPs, CEOs? Important. Training on marketing. It's not easy to do marketing meetings and marketing plans. They take some work. Train your people on how to do it. And then, of course, we have social media and advertising. This is a new field for a lot of people. And a lot of times operations doesn't fully understand the whole SEO and social media marketing. So it's really important to bring people in with tools to train your people. The tools are really, really important. So let's talk about what does a clear goal look like. So to me, a goal is always SMART. And here's what SMART stands for: specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. Now, clear goals mean anything that you set, not just on your marketing plan, but let's say we're going to do clear goals for sales calls. You can't say to people, I want you to be out of the building. That's not a SMART goal. Where are they going? I always tell people, if you leave salespeople to their own resources, you're going to find them in Starbucks. So we need to be very specific. Salespeople will hate me when I say that. But just go into a Starbucks the middle of any day and let's see who we see in there. So specific, how many sales calls do you want this person to do? And where do you want them to go? I would like to see next month, I would like you to call on 5 geriatricians. That's measurable. So I can actually next month come back and say, wow, you not only called on 5, you called on 8. You met the goals. Then we look at achievable. If I said I'd like you to call on 20 geriatricians next month, that's probably not an achievable goal. Sometimes people want to say, I'd like to get I have 20 open 2-bedroom apartments. I'm going to fill them by next month. Probably not achievable. So your role as the leader of the marketing meeting is to help people to reach achievable goals and to make them specific and measurable. They also need to be relevant. Relevant means that any of the goals you set have to tie back to your original goal. So saying I want you to call on geriatricians when your goal might be to increase the occupancy from 10 to 12 in my memory care unit. Well, that may be relevant, might be more relevant if we said we wanted you to go to dementia-specific physicians. What isn't relevant is we're going to hold an event for the residents on choosing new clothing from the clothing people next year. That's not relevant. It doesn't meet the goal you're setting. Now, are there some community events that are relevant? Absolutely. I mean, if one of your goals is to increase the family involvement, that you want to see more referrals coming from the direct community around your building, you may want to hold community events that involve the residents. Then it's relevant. It also must be time bound. So saying go out of the building and get me referrals is not a smart goal. Saying I would like to see referrals from General Hospital. I would like to see referrals from General Hospital move from 10 a month to 15 a month by the end of this quarter. That maybe is more, now it's time bound. I can come back next quarter and I can say, let's look at these SMART goals. Let's look at your marketing action plan and see if you actually met the goal. That's what you're actually trying to do. And that brings us to this one, our final pillar. This is the pillar that everybody hates because it's uncomfortable. It's not always fun to sit down with someone and say, one of the things that you and I agreed on, right there's the first secret, make sure you don't tell them what they need to do, but you involve them in what you would. So when you're sitting with your salesperson and you're saying, this is the goal for, we said we wanted to increase referrals from the community from 10 to 20 by the end of each month, by the end of the quarter. Okay, how are we going to do that? You and I, salesperson, agreed that one of the ways we were going to do that is you were going to increase your sales calls to local clergy from 2 a month to 5 a month. Let's look by the end of the quarter. Let's look and see how we did. Well, first month we got 8. Second month we had 2, and the third month we had none. I need to now hold this person accountable to the goals they set. It's really important, and it's not important for a blame game, like it's his fault, it's her fault. This is what I hear when I go in. When there's no accountability pillar, everybody blames everyone else. Your role is to sit down and say, this is not finding fault. This is what happened. Tell me, why was it difficult? Well, I couldn't reach people, or I didn't have the right list, or I'm uncomfortable calling on rabbis. Now I know how I can help you. Now I can bring someone in to go on calls with you that maybe is Jewish, or, I am not comfortable calling on surgeons. Why am I doing that? So now we can, let's talk about that. So accountability, though sometimes is uncomfortable, comes with your responsibility. And I love this quote from Kobe Bryant. If you're going to be a leader, you're not going to please everybody. You have to hold people accountable, even if you have that moment of being uncomfortable. So accountability is an absolute must. It's something that we get better and better at. We learn to be better at it. It is never comfortable. So that's the 4th pillar. Here are the 4 pillars that we've reviewed today. A solid foundation, systems that work. We went over some of those systems and tools, how to set clear goals with everyone, and how all of this, each of these pillars leads to the 4th pillar, or accountability. So this was the why. This is why we want to look at putting these solid 4 pillars in for foundation for you. And next time we're going to look at the what. So what are those tools? What do they look like? What do they sound like? We want to make sure that we are creating sales systems that are as dynamic as the clinical systems that are in place. And for those of you who've never looked at your clinical systems, if I have salespeople on here, you may not have, go and look at some of the systems that are in place for how we make sure we stay out of trouble with the state and the feds. We need to be that specific when we're looking at when we're looking at systems for salespeople. So that's my training for today. I'm going to turn it back, I think, to Kimberly so we can see if there are any questions.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Ronnie. As a reminder, I did put a note in the chat during today's session. If you do have any questions, please submit them utilizing the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. At this point in time, I do not see any questions that have come in, but as always, Ronnie has her information up on the screen here. Feel free to reach out to Ronnie or myself if you have any questions that may arise after today's session. And at that, I think we can give you back 5 minutes of your day, and we look forward to seeing everyone again in June. Thanks so much, Ronnie.
You're welcome. Thank you, everyone.